So welcome to week 1, Wednesday, Global Issues. Again, like I said, I guess I should put a different screen up for you guys because this is frozen. There we go. Like I said, if you're in class, I just want you a little closer so that people that are listening online can go ahead and also hear any questions that you guys have and any input that you have. So just to reiterate what you have due this week, I'm looking at our week 1 expectations. Remember that you have the 3 videos this week, and this is, I think, the only week you'll have that many videos. It's typically a reading and a video or a mix of the two. There just wasn't any readings in the collections in your textbook for this edition that address Israel and Palestine or the Iraq War. So I wanted to make sure you guys have that good base of knowledge about those events in the Middle East. And then make sure your week 1 quiz, someone's already submitted it, so that's awesome. You guys are already on top of it. And then your media literacy assignment, again, is due on Sunday. Now, one thing I want you guys to be aware of is I will not be here on Monday. I'm going to be out of town. I'm leaving tomorrow. So I won't hold class in here. What I'm going to do today, this afternoon, is I'm going to record my Monday lecture, and then I'll put it on the shelf for you guys. So then Monday morning at the normal time, you guys would come in. If you just want to go in and listen to that lecture, that'll serve in lieu of holding class that day. Okay, so I'll be driving home that day from California. So if you guys do have any questions, you can't email me or give me a call. I'll be available. I just can't be here physically. So just be aware of that. I'll post an announcement about that as well, so you guys are aware. Okay, so that's housekeeping for the day. So let's go ahead and look at our Today in History. Frank might remember this. Today in 1975, Sony released the Betamax recorder in Japan. So it's probably older than most of the people in this classroom. So there you go. And that's kind of the precursor to VHS, right? And the VCR. Hey guys, if you could sit in the front 4 rows, anywhere in the front 4, just so I can make sure we pick up audio for the recording. Okay. All right. So that's our Today in History. Let's look at what is trending today. On Twitter. Did anyone hear the news yesterday? The big news about the FBI. What was it? You guys remember? They fired the director, or Trump fired Comey, the director of the FBI. And so, again, we have to be careful. We don't jump to conclusions, right? Because both sides of the political spectrum are coming to their own conclusions. So it'll be interesting to see the news out today. About 10 minutes ago, I did just get a notification from New York Times on my phone that a few days ago, Comey had asked the Judicial Department for more funds to in the Russian investigation. So now the left media is kind of jumping on that and saying, well, Trump might have thought that he's going to release a smoking gun. The left said, or the right says, no, that doesn't make any sense. So again, look at different sources in order to kind of triangulate what the actual story is. So that's kind of the big news today. I had CNN on this morning when I was getting ready for work, and I normally don't like CNN or Fox or like those mainstream ones, but I just wanted to see what the mainstream news, I mean, it's all over, right? That's all they're talking about. There's nothing else that they were talking about for an entire hour. So this I will expect will be in the news for the next few days. So if you guys see anything interesting you want to share with the class, bring it to class next Wednesday when we meet, or if you want to put it on that discuss the options discussion board and the class can kind of see what you have to share, that would work as well. So let's go ahead and take out your cell phones and let's do a poll. And if you are online, we've got Francisco online. So if you're online, you can also participate in the poll. Remember that this is the phone number, 37607. You're kind of at a weird angle. Can you see it? Yeah. Okay. And then the body of your text will be the code that you choose. Oh, we're all over the board. See, if someone does 1948, then you're flipping me off. There you go. A virtual middle finger, if you will. Leave this up for another minute. And as of right now, one of you is correct. It's 1948. Yeah, is that you? Yep. All right, congratulations. You win nothing but our gratitude. So, oh, There's another one coming in. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is we are going to talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I think that's a key, crucial understanding to understand what's going on in the Middle East today, because there's been a lot of tension between Israel and Palestine since really before the creation of Israel. So when you guys hear about Israel and Palestine in the news, or you hear the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, what do you know about this? What comes to mind? What are they fighting over? Land, yeah. And so how far back does this go?
Wow.
All the way
Biblical, yeah. Is that what you're going to say, Frank?
It goes all the way back to Abraham and Sarah and Hagar and Ishmael and Isaac.
Yeah, so you really have, so throughout history, human history, like recorded human history, especially when you look at after Christianity and Islam come into play, you have three religions that claim this area as their holy land, right? And so you have kind of a religious fight between the three over who is going to control Jerusalem and the area that we know today as Israel and Palestine. When you think about it in that broad term, yes, you guys are correct. This goes back to biblical times. But when you think about it in more modern terms, when does the fight over land specifically start between the Jewish people and the Palestinians?
Like 48, when the UN, was it UN who gave Israel back, except that, you know, the Palestinians and the Muslims were living there. They're like, wait a minute, we're already here.
Right, but even before World War II.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it really starts in the late 1800s with the Zionist movement. And do you guys know what Zionism is? Anyone want to define that? Just loosely.
basically the Holy Land after death, basically.
Well, it's a movement for the homeland for the Jewish people. And that was the idea of Zionism. Because in the late 1800s, how are Jews treated, especially in Eastern Europe? Like in Russia, the Ukraine, that area, Eastern Europe.
Were they minorities?
Yeah, they are minorities, and there's these things called pogroms, which are kind of, you might want to maybe consider it maybe a form of genocide in a way. They're trying to expel Jewish people from these areas. And so the Jewish people in the late 1800s started to immigrate. A lot come to the United States. There's a wave of immigration from Eastern Europe from 1880 to 1920, in which 25 million immigrants come into the U.S., and a lot of that are going to be Jewish people. My family came over in that wave. And then you have a small percent that start settling in Palestine, and they start settlements. And so that's a buzzword you're going to hear a lot when you start following it in the news, these settlements of these Israeli Jewish settlements. And they start settling Palestinian land. And in the video you're going to watch today, if any of you have watched it yet, or for this week, the Seeds of Conflict video, they talk about how for a while there was kind of some coexistence between the two sides, between the Palestinians or the Arabs, however you want to describe them, and the Jewish people. And eventually it blows up because they start fighting over land. And then World War I happens. Well, right before World War I, they were going to sit down and hash out these issues and try to figure out boundaries and borders. And then World War I happened, and that all went out the door because World War I took precedent. And then since then, they've pretty much been fighting over it since then. So to get us started on it, I always like a little humor, I suppose. Does anyone watch John Oliver? A few of you. Okay, so this is a clip. He's talking about Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the current prime minister of Israel. All right. So let me make sure I guess I should turn this on. Okay. Just a short clip, and this is from 2015, so it's a little old, but it's just funny. Gets us going.
I'm John Oliver. Thank you for being with us. Just time for a quick recap of the week, and we begin in Israel. Drama-wise, the opposite of Canada. Now, Israel had their election this week, and despite being behind in the polls, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party won resoundingly, which some credited Netanyahu's last-minute swing to the even farther right.
The Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday said on his watch, there's not going to be a Palestine, there's not going to be a two-state solution.
Wow. Okay. So, no two-state solution then, but hold on, let's not jump to conclusions. Maybe he only said that because he's planning on a three-state solution. Israel, Palestine, and bonus Palestine. We don't know. We don't know for sure. But look, let's accept that in part, due to that promise, Netanyahu looks like he's here to stay. The problem that he now has is, how is he going to convince the US that he is a credible partner for negotiation, given that he explicitly said he would not allow a two-state solution, but only a one-state solution?
I don't want a one-state solution. I want a sustainable, peaceful two-state solution, but for that, circumstances have to change.
Now that's pretty impressive, because that is a Michael Jackson level of walking backwards. He just demonstrated the verbal gymnastics of a guy caught being too honest on his first date. I don't want kids. Wait, hold on, you want kids? I love kids! And in the right circumstances, I could absolutely see myself having them. I never said I don't want kids. This is why what Netanyahu just said is so amazing. He was trying to escape something that he'd said that had left him almost no wiggle room.
Asked if that meant there would be no Palestinian state if he were to continue as prime minister, Netanyahu responded, correct.
How do you get out of that? It's impossible. I've got to say, if he somehow escapes this, he should go on the road as Netanyahu-Dini. Words cannot hold him. But let's move on to Starbucks.
Okay, so I brought that clip up because he's talking about a two-state solution. So that's kind of the current debate, is should there be two states recognized or should there only be Israel recognized, okay? So typically well, I'm going to backtrack. I'm going to give you kind of a historical context before we start talking about what we think today about the two-state solution. So for the background of the conflict, so when you consider this whole area, disregard the colors at the moment, that whole region historically has been named Palestine. It's been occupied, though, by many different peoples throughout history. It's been occupied by the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Romans, the Byzantines, the Ottomans, and they were part of the Ottoman Empire, which fell during World War I. Now, after World War I, there's something called the British Mandate in 1922. Have you guys ever heard of that before? Do you guys know what they stated or what it said? So the British Mandate pretty much said that Palestine would be controlled by the League of Nations. So do you guys remember the League of Nations after World War I? The U.S. never ratified it, though they were never a part of it. It's kind of the precursor to the United Nations, okay? So they said that Palestine would be a mandate, which is kind of a fancy way of just saying that the British are going to be, you know, in charge of the area for the most part, okay? And that was instituted by the League of Nations, like I said. So that was in 1922. And then let's fast forward. Well, actually, let me backtrack, because this is what the mandate was in 1922. And if you guys remember from our map quiz, not all of this becomes Palestine or Israel. Do you guys remember what this area is going to become? Jordan. It becomes Jordan. Good job, guys. Okay. So then let's fast forward then to the UN partition plan in 1947. So after World War II, and you obviously have, you know, the liquidation of 6 million Jews in Europe. That's a major problem. And that kind of bolsters the effort of the Jewish people to get their own homeland. And so the UN in 1947, they bring out their partition plan, which said that this is kind of this idea that anything in the orange or yellow, depending on how it shows on my screen, would be an Arab state, and then the blue would be the Jewish state. And that was the two-state solution kind of at that point, all right? And it was the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 181 for the future government of Palestine. And so they did recommend a two-state solution at this time, with Jerusalem, which is right here on the map, being protected and ran by the UN. Okay, because that's really the area of contention here, right, is who's going to control Jerusalem. And if it's right in the middle of an Arab state, the Jews obviously have issues with that. And if it would be right in the middle of a Jewish state, the Arabs would have an issue with that. So the UN says, let's split up this land, and then we will mandate Jerusalem. Okay, so the mandate was to be terminated in 1948, meaning once the mandate is terminated in 1948, Israel becomes their own nation, and the UN is no longer mandating it or controlling the area. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's just kind of a brief overview so that you understand. Now, as soon as they become a state, let me move over. Conflicts begin almost immediately. So they become a state in 1948, and you have your first Arab-Israeli war in 1948. So really, pretty much as soon as Israel says, yes, we are a state, we declare our statehood, you have the first Arab-Israeli war. So the Arabs are going to reject the partition plan. They declare war on Israel. It's Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. And then this war lasts till 1949, and it changed the borders. And because of that, Israel controlled some of the areas designated for the Arab state under the partition plan. And they controlled an area called the Gaza Strip. And this is something you guys might hear a lot about in the news, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank. Okay, so now Israel wins this war, and they get to control land that was meant for the Arab state under the UN partition plan. So you can imagine that's not going to help tensions in any way, shape, or form, correct? And so peace does not start at this time, right? And so Egypt was supposed to control that area as well. Okay, then you have the Six-Day War in 1967. And this was a preemptive attack by Israel. It's in June of 1967, and this was a preemptive attack in response to the mobilization of Egyptian forces along the Israeli border and the Sinai Peninsula. So there were Egyptian forces here, and so the Israelis said, well, instead of waiting to get attacked, we're just going to attack them preemptively. And so they do, and they destroyed nearly the entire Egyptian Air Force. Now, when you consider this, how are the Israelis so strong that they can take on these major Arab countries by themselves? Who are they getting aid from?
Us.
Us, yes. And actually, when you look at the major countries that we give aid to, Israel is almost always the top two. I believe in 2015 or 2016, I'm mixing it up, we gave them $3 billion. We usually give them the most, and Afghanistan had a lot in aid for the last couple of years as well, and Egypt as well.
We also gave them a lot of aid just for the Iraqi conflict.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They get a lot of aid for security, for their military.
We got a lot of Patriot missile battle here.
Definitely. So, you know, they're able. I mean, if the U.S. did not help Israel at this point, Israel would have just folded. Like, there's no way they would have been able to stand up to, you know, being surrounded by all these hostile Arab countries towards them. Okay, then after Israel destroys the Egyptian Air Force in the Sinai, they launched a group attack into Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula. They're controlling the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula, and this is the major problem, is for Egypt, now Israel is controlling Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula. And if you're Egypt, why is the Sinai Peninsula an important strategic area to control?
Two different routes of trade.
Yes, trade. And what's the canal over there?
The Sinai.
You're right with the S. You're right.
Suez Canal.
Yeah, the Suez Canal. And so that's an important trade connecting Asia and the Middle East with the Mediterranean and Europe. And so for Egypt to lose that to Israel is just, it stings very, very badly.
Would it also be, it forces Egypt to go, if they want to attack through land, going through very small bottlenecks?
Exactly. Definitely. Good point.
Isn't it something like $1 million to go through the Suez Canal?
I don't know the numbers on it, but with Israel controlling it, Egypt would then have to come to Israel and say, can we cross? And so that becomes a major problem. So that was in 1967. And it really literally was a 6-day war. It was June 5th through the 10th. Okay, so there you go. They're really creative with their namings of wars, right? The 6-day war. All right, now in 1973, there's another war called the Yom Kippur War, and that was a war around that Jewish holiday, Yom Kippur. It's a war between Israel and Egypt in the Sinai. And so you have an Arab coalition that launched a surprise attack on Israeli positions in Israeli-occupied territory. You have Syria in the Golan Heights area over here. And a ceasefire is achieved via a UN resolution, and this is an Israeli victory as well. So things are looking actually pretty good for Israel between 1948 and 1973 with U.S. help and with UN backing. They're able to maintain their statehood.
I looked it up. 2008, 21,400 vessels went through the Suez Canal.
Okay.
Total receipts, 5.381 billion with a B.
Oh man.
Average cost $251,000
Per ship, and that's just your average, right? So. Yeah, wow. I didn't know that. That's interesting. Yeah, feel free if you have your computers and phones, you want to look stuff up as we're talking, go ahead, pipe in. I love it. It's great. Okay, then you have the Yom Kippur War. And then you have something called the Intifada, and that's really just an uprising. And this is an uprising by the Palestinians from 1987 to 1993. And that's where you really start to see a lot of the modern violence between the Arabs in Palestine and the Jews in Israel. And between that 6-year time period, you have 1,000 Palestinians are killed. I'm not sure the exact number of Jews that die in this. I'd have to look that up. But you have a lot of them that are going to be detained and imprisoned or deported out of the area. Okay, now before that though, I want to backtrack. So I want to go back to after this Yom Kippur War in 1973, and I want to talk about a peace attempt that the U.S. tries to broker between Egypt and Israel. And so, do you guys know anything about the presidency of Jimmy Carter? Great. He's arguably probably done the best things as a former president than all presidents in U.S. history. He's really a humanitarian. He's done a lot of things with like Habitat for Humanity, and he's really walks the walk for what he talks about. I have a lot of respect for Jimmy Carter. His presidency wasn't great, but as a past president or as a former president, he really used his position to do really good things in the world.
Wasn't he the one that said we will always help the state of Israel no matter what?
Well, pretty much every U.S. president has said that since the beginning of Israel as a nation.
But wasn't he the first one to actually do it?
Yeah, he's the first one to broker a peace attempt, for sure, definitely. And so this is the Camp David Accords. Have you guys at least heard that before? Okay, so just a brief overview of the Camp David Accords. What Carter does is it's September of 1978, and he gets the Prime Minister of Israel, which is Menachem Begin, and the President of Egypt, Anwar Sadat, together. I think it's a 13-day summit at Camp David in Maryland. And he gets them to sign a framework for peace. And this is a major, major political win. This is probably arguably his best foreign policy win as president. Because when you consider that the big major foreign policy issue going on during his presidency was the Tehran hostage crisis, where there was like 444 days hostage situation in Tehran in the embassy.
Yeah. Isn't there just like the joke thrown around that he took them and locked them in the room until they came to an agreement?
No, he didn't actually. What he did is they were separated for the most part. Like they met at the beginning of the conference and then they were separate, and he just went back and forth. And he would say, okay, so what do you think about this? And one party would say, we don't like this and we don't like this. And he'd bring it back to the other party, and we don't like this and we don't like this. And at one point he felt that it was going to be a stalemate and that it wasn't going to be successful. And ultimately they do come up with this framework for peace. And so this is the key points of it. So it's a framework for peace. So it's not a treaty. So I want to be clear on that, but a framework for peace. So it's the process for Palestinian self-government in the West Bank and Gaza, a framework for the conclusion of a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. So that was the key point of this is here's the framework, and then you guys have X amount of time to sign a peace treaty, right? And then transitional self-government or self-governing Palestinian Authority was to be elected to replace Israeli political and military forces in the occupied territories. This formally ended the war between the two countries. And here's the biggie. Israel agreed to withdraw from the Sinai. And that's what Egypt really they could not budge on, right? Like, we're not going to sign a peace treaty and allow Israel to stay in control of the Sinai Peninsula. It's just not going to happen. And then Egypt agreed to establish normal diplomatic relations and open the Suez Canal then to Israel. So you give us back the Sinai Peninsula, we'll open the Suez Canal to you. And so here's a short video clip of them signing the Camp David Accords.
The document that we will sign
I'm just going to watch the first minute.
entitled A Framework for Peace in the Middle East, agreed at Camp David. And the text of these two documents will be released tomorrow. The documents will be signed by President Sadat and Prime Minister Begin, and it will be witnessed by me. We have to exchange 3 documents, so we'll all sign 3 times for this one.
And so this is a momentous occasion in history that you have these two leaders at the same table signing this framework for peace. Okay, so I'm going to get out of that. Okay, now let's see if I have that famous picture. Yeah, so this is the famous picture you guys might have seen, the awkward three-way handshake, right? But yeah, just the fact that you have the Prime Minister of Israel and the President of Egypt shaking hands with Jimmy Carter is a big deal. Okay, so that's a big deal in history. Now, they actually do sign a peace treaty later on. They move forward with it. Everything is going okay. And then what happens to Anwar Sadat? He's assassinated for this. There's an extremist in Egypt that don't agree with him compromising with the Israelis, and he's assassinated for this peace deal. So does peace last? No, right? So there's going to be ongoing conflicts. And so what you'll have later on is President Clinton also tries to broker peace, and these are the Oslo Accords in 1993. And this is the Israeli Prime Minister is Yitzhak Rabin, and then the PLO chairman, which is Yasser Arafat. And this peace process, again, is on paper, and it doesn't really do anything lasting because there's still going to be major conflict within the area. Okay.
First was terror.
Yeah, and so I want to identify who's who. Oh, and I want to show you this. We're going to get back to who's who so you guys have an understanding of who's in charge of these areas. But this is the Palestinian loss of land from 1946 to 2000. So this is, the green is Palestinian land, and then the dots, the white dots are like the Jewish settlements we were talking about, right? They were coming in and settling the land. This is the partition plan that we already talked about in 1947. The white would be Jewish Israeli land, and then the green would be Palestinian land. And then you can see that throughout, and this is just till 2000, but you can see just the whittling away of Palestinian land. Now, let's look at the who's who. All right, so there's a few organizations that I want you guys to be aware of. So you have the PLO, which is the Palestinian Liberation Organization. They're a political organization that represents the world's Palestinians. They were formed in 1964 to centralize the leadership of various Palestinian groups that previously had operated kind of incognito or clandestinely, all right? They became prominent after the Six-Day War in 1967, and like you were saying, what was your name again? David. As David was saying, they engaged in guerrilla warfare against Israel between the 1960s and the 1980s, all right? They entered peace negotiations with them in the 1990s with those Oslo Accords with President Clinton in 1983. In 1974, the Arab League, which is kind of consider them maybe like the UN of the Arab world, right? It's a coalition of Arab countries. They recognize the PLO as a representative of the Palestinian people. And actually the PLO gained observer status at the UN in 1974. So they were recognized by the UN in 1974. Okay, then you have the Palestinian Authority. And this was established as part of the Oslo Accords. Okay, that's something different. And it was an agreement that called for the Palestinian Authority to take control over the population areas in the occupied regions rather than the PLO. So they kind of have the similar goals. They're just slightly different organizations. And have you guys ever heard of Hamas? Yeah, so what do you guys know about Hamas? Terrorist organization, right? They are designated as, like, I think the U.S. and, I don't know if does the UN recognize them as a terrorist organization? Yeah, okay, so they are a Palestinian Sunni Islamic fundamentalist organization. They've been in charge of the Gaza Strip since 2007. All right, so there's been a lot of contention over that. And they were founded in 1987, and they're an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. So they're, again, a very, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess I don't want to say they're the Muslim Brotherhood, but they're like a very strict Islamic organization, and they are governing the Gaza Strip currently. And then the Arab League, like I said, is it was formerly called the League of Arab States, and they're a regional organization of Arab countries in and around North Africa. They were created in 1945 at the same time the UN was, and their original states were Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, and Syria, and currently they have 22 members. Okay, so that's kind of your who's who. This is who's in charge. So right now your Israeli Prime Minister is Benjamin Netanyahu. Your Hamas leader is Khaled Mashal, and your PLO/PA leader is Mahmoud Abbas. So if you ever hear those names or those organizations, that just kind of gives you a brief overview of who is who, okay? So let's talk about the conflict today. So what is going on today? Is there any sort of resolution? Is there a path to resolution? Not really. I mean, in my opinion, I don't see this being resolved in the near future. So under the Obama administration, Obama and Netanyahu famously did not like each other. So it was, I don't know if you guys remember, maybe a year or two ago, it was while Obama was still president, Netanyahu came and addressed the U.S. Congress, which is kind of, I'm not going to say it's illegal, but it's kind of a diplomatic. Yes, exactly. And so pretty much they didn't really like each other very much. Now, from what I understand, Trump and Netanyahu have a closer relationship. They like each other better. But Trump has placed Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, as being in charge of brokering peace in the Middle East, which, in my opinion, is laughable because it shows a lot of bias because you're putting a Jewish person in charge of this. You should put someone, I think, that maybe is more outside of the situation in charge. And I don't really know what Jared Kushner's qualifications are for brokering peace in the Middle East. So we'll have to see how that moves forward. But some of the issues going on right now is there are restrictions on Palestinian movements within the area. So what I'm showing you right now is this is the West Bank, and this is a wall. There's like border gates type of ideas in a lot of the areas of the West Bank to control that Palestinian movement throughout the area. There's also a Gaza blockade. So that's the problem that the Palestinians face is if you live in the Gaza Strip, but your mom lives in the West Bank, because there are, I think 20% of the Israeli population are Palestinian Arabs. They actually are Israeli citizens, but they identify as Arabs, as Palestinians. And so if your mom lives in the West Bank and you live in the Gaza Strip, when you look at the map, they look really close, right? But it takes an awful long time to get over there because you have to go through all these security and military checkpoints. I was listening to an interview with a man who lives in, I forget which spot he lived in, but his family lived in the other, and it takes him 3 days to get to the other area because the Israelis patrol the area and they restrict the movements of Palestinians throughout the area. So what I want to show you here too is how do Arab Israelis identify? So if you're an Arab and you're a Muslim and you are born in Israel, in what is technically today Israel, how do you identify? And so I wanted to show you guys this video. It's short. It's about, we got to watch it 5 seconds.
It's the Memorial Day sale at the
5-second ad for Mega Furniture.
Buy from our huge stock of premium inventory.
Okay, this guy does this video. It's only 3 minutes about how Arab Israelis identify themselves. And so it's just kind of an interesting viewpoint.
השאלה הראשונה, איך אתה מגדיר את עצמך, כאילו ישראלי, פלסטיני, ערבי, איך?
אני ערבי פלסטיני. אבל אני גר במדינת ישראל.
אוקיי. ואם אתה בחו"ל, נגיד שאתה נוסע לארצות הברית ומישהו שואל אותך, איפה אתה גר? מה אתה אומר?
אני אומר לו, אני ערבי, אבל גר במדינת ישראל.
Do you feel Israeli, Palestinian, or both? And how do you define yourself?
I am a Palestinian who lives in Israel against her will.
Against your will?
Yeah.
Okay. When you're outside of Israel, what do you call yourself? If somebody says, where are you from? Okay. And in here you call yourself
Palestinian.
Palestinian. Okay. How do you define yourself? Israeli, Arab, Palestinian?
The first was a human. And that's enough.
I like that answer.
Okay. If you are in the United States and somebody says, where are you from? What do you say?
I'm from Israel, but I'm Palestinian and Oregon.
Okay. אתה מרגיש ישראלי, דרוזי או משהו אחר? או גם וגם וגם.
Druze is another sect of religion in the area of Muslim.
כאילו איך אני מגדיר את עצמי?
כן.
ערבי, ישראלי, דרוזי.
Do you feel Israeli, Palestinian, or both? Or something else?
Actually, I'm Greek, so I feel...
So you're Greek Orthodox?
I am a Greek, but I don't feel Israeli. I don't know, both.
Okay. When you're outside of Israel, and somebody says, where are you from? What do you say?
If like I'm in Jordan or Egypt, I'm always afraid to say Nazareth. They're like, oh, they freak out.
Really?
So I say the Holy Land, or yeah, the whole Gaza.
If you're in the United States or something, what would you say?
Gaza.
Israel? אתה מגדיר את עצמך ערבי, פלסטיני, ישראלי, איך?
מגדיר את עצמי דרוזי,
דרוזי, כן.
ערבי, ישראלי.
כן. אם אתה בארצות הברית ומישהו שואל אותך מאיפה אתה, מה אתה אומר?
ישראל.
בסדר, קודם כל.
קודם כל אני נולדתי בארץ.
כן.
פעלת על הזהות ישראלית.
כן.
אני ישראלי. אבל גם יש חלק פניי, כאילו, חלק בפנים זה פלסטיני. בגלל שאני ערבי גם. ודרך כלל במגזר הערבי אצלנו קשה להגדיר את עצמנו טוב. כי מה זה ערבי ישראלי או ערבי פלסטיני? זה כאילו לא עושה את זה בדיוק תשובה מדויקת. זה תמיד מתלבטים בזה. אז אני חצי חצי. לא רוצה להגיד לך שאני ישראלי ב-100% ולא פלסטיני ב-100%. בטח שאני נולדתי וגדלתי בעיר הערבייה בנצרת, אני מנצרת.
Okay, so that gives you kind of an overview of what those people are feeling. And so you can see that some of them identify both, right, both ways. I like the human answer first. I think that's something that we can all benefit from having that viewpoint. And when you look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that these are people, first of all, before they're Arabs or Israelis. So always keep that in mind. So, go.
He was specifically asking Palestinians, like he was fighting.
Yes, he wanted. Yes.
Back.
Exactly. He
Okay.
wanted to know how Palestinian or Arab people who lived in Israel and had an Israeli ID, how they identified.
Okay.
Because if you could be born in Israel and be Arab and Palestinian and have an Israeli ID card and be an Israeli citizen, but you could then identify as a Muslim, as an Arab, as a Palestinian. And so you have about 20% of the population of Israel today that falls under that umbrella. And so I think that's an interesting viewpoint to consider. So I want to open up the floor to get your guys' thoughts. What do you think about this conflict? Is there a solution? What could be a possible solution? What role could the United States play? What role should the rest of the world community play? Just interested in your opinions and viewpoints at this point. Who wants to start? Should there be so let's start with a specific question. Should there be a one-state or two-state solution? Should the Palestinians have their own specific state? Because they are recognized by the UN. So like we said, the PLO was recognized in 74. And later in 74, they were granted non-state observer status. In 1988, the UN acknowledged the Palestinian Declaration of Independence. In November 2012, the UN gave Palestine non-member observer state status. And in December of 2012, they said that they would use the state of Palestine in all official UN documents. Another thing to consider is Google. When you look at Google Maps, there's this big debate a couple years ago. Google recognized Palestine on Google Maps. So what do you guys think? Should there be a one-state, two-state? What do you think is the best option for peace in the Middle East? What do you think, Jason?
I think in the long term, a one-state solution will be best for the region.
Okay.
Just because it would stop people from identifying as one side and feeling animosity towards the other because of past transgressions.
Right.
So probably creating a one-state solution that is completely differently named than either of the original parties.
But so in this one-state solution that you're proposing, would then all Palestinians and all Israelis have the same rights, the same citizenship idea?
Yeah, they would all have the same access to the entire region across the whole place.
Okay, regardless.
Yes.
Okay. What else? What do you guys think?
They've been fighting for so long. Two states is not going to make a difference.
I know.
Because they're going to still fight.
Yeah. So even if the UN gives Palestine a full recognition, like they're a member state, but not in the way the U.S. and Israel is. They're observers. Okay, so they don't have the same exact rights. They're recognized, but not fully. So that's an interesting point then. So even if the UN says, okay, Palestine's a full member state, that doesn't mean Israel's just going to accept that.
Yes.
Right. So, okay. What do you think, Frank? And we'll come back to you, Jason.
Well, ideally, it'd be nice to have a one-state solution.
Mm-hmm.
But as a Christian, and I've read my book, it ain't gonna happen. The only solution is in Revelation, and that's where it's gonna all get solved.
Okay, so let's look at it though from a secular viewpoint. Like, what do you think governments and people? Is there anything we can do today to facilitate peace in this region? Because this is a strategic region, right? Especially like on the Mediterranean, right by Syria, right by Iraq. So when you look at it kind of secularly speaking, what can governments and people do to secure peace?
One thing is that third-party countries or Israel and Palestine, they can like ask the citizens, what like would you be certain citizens, would you be all right with coming together, and it might help facilitate others to sort of get more used to the idea of being in a single party solution.
Okay.
By slowly introducing the idea as a whole to the rest of the country from specific groups.
Okay. What do you think, Frank?
My response to that is, how do you boil a frog?
Well, I mean,
Put him
yes.
in a pot and slowly turn up the heat until he's cooked. And you're saying slowly change everybody's mind until they're all on the same page.
Well, and the problem too comes down to religious ideology, right? And it's very hard to change people's minds when it comes to religious ideology, and trying to put that aside and look at it in a more secular point of view, because I feel both sides of the issue. Like, my family's Jewish, and my family came to the United States during the pogroms, and so I feel for the Israeli people, I feel for the Jewish people in the sense that they've always been persecuted against, and then especially after the Holocaust, and then they just want their one region. Okay, so I get that, but at the same time, when they do start coming in there in the late 1800s and settling, that was Palestinian land. So I think both sides have an equal beef with one another, that we can't say one side's more superior or one side's more deserving of this land. It's very hard to say that, especially from a religious standpoint, right? Because it's everyone's holy land. So if we do a one-state solution, would it have to be a dual Arab Jewish state with two religions, or how do you do that, right? And like the girl in the video had said, I identify as a Palestinian living in Israel against my will, right? So you're going to have people that have that view too, that if this becomes a one-state solution, I don't feel as if I'm represented, right? But I do think in the long run, like you said, if we want any peace, there has to be a one-state solution. I don't know what that one state would look like, but I mean, I don't see that happening anytime in the future, especially under Netanyahu and the current, strife going on in the Middle East.
Even if you do get that one-state solution where there's no longer statewide conflict, there's no longer like organized governments at war with each other, you're still gonna have people.
Yes, exactly.
Against each other.
Yeah, you're still fighting ideology.
They're not just gonna be like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They said it's the one state now, so we're just gonna be happy and love each other. And yeah, exactly. That's a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest counter to that is like, but by having the one-state solution, it facilitates the idea of unity rather than two states, which facilitates the idea of
division.
Us and them.
Exactly.
So
I agree with you on that. But
yeah.
Things like that look excellent on paper, right? Like communism looks great on paper. You can't really then put it into play and have it really be successful. So, any other viewpoints on this? So just again, keep this kind of in the back of your head when you watch the news or read the news outlets, because I can, under the Trump administration, it's just going to be interesting to see how they move forward working with Netanyahu and Israel and the Palestinians and the UN, and see what types of solutions they propose, what they come up with. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'll give you guys, we'll take a break till, let's say 11:30, just make it even. It's 11:15 right now, so take 15 minutes. We'll come back and we're going to start talking about the Iraq War.
Oh.
I know. You're just getting more depressing and depressing.
Abby.
Yes.
Did I miss a lot?
I'm wondering if my mic is on. Oh no.
I mean,
Test.
I've watched the recording.
Testing. Testing. Hold on. I don't know. I don't know if my audio picked up. Well, I'm recording it on another thing too, because I had an issue with. Oh, I don't want that. I had an issue with testing. Oh, come on.
Are you still streaming it through
yeah, I'm recording. Yeah.
check on it right now.
Yeah, will you check it? Well, you know what? It's not going to be available yet. I have to stop recording it to then
But
upload it.
be, like, live?
Yeah, check it live. Yeah, do that live. Because you should have gotten an invitation from Canvas to do that. But it's not, it was showing my microphone earlier. Testing. Why is this not working?
Can we check that it's in the audio devices?
Yeah, how do you do that?
On the bottom right.
Right here?
Right there, yeah.
What do
You
I do?
Right click it.
Right click it? Oh, right click
yeah.
that.
And then recording devices.
Well, it's on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that means it's isolated to the application itself. So check the its settings. So check click on the settings.
Which settings?
Those right there.
Oh, right here.
Yeah.
Oh, I need flash installed in order to...
Oh, okay, no worries.
Hit the test again. I think it said something about.
Okay, let's try it.
Supposed to have a bar.
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
So-
actually, instead of default, manually select it.
See, that's what I did. And then testing, but it's saying headset.
Yeah.
See what next says. Okay, hold on.
What's the other one?
This was, see, I had this microphone set up too, but it wasn't working right. Testing.
That's weird.
Well, I'm hoping that this recording,
Yeah, I mean, that should be recording all audio.
I
but-
hope.
So,
Okay, well,
OBS is good about doing that.
okay, I'm gonna go grab my, one of the guys in the office too and see if he can test this for me. I'll be back. We still have a few minutes.
Okay.
Talk amongst yourselves. I don't think it's picking it up anyway. Recording on YouTube, and that they just tested it and they were able to hear the audio. So we got a backup if this audio is not picking up on this.
You stop breaking stuff.
I know, right? I'm the worst.
She fucking did it.
Did anybody hear the news about The Rock this morning?
What rock?
Dwayne Johnson
Oh, no. What is it?
did an interview with GQ, made a hint that he might want to run for president.
Oh, so now all TV stars are just going to start running for president. I'm running in 2020, so he's running against me.
He's former WWE champion, Abby. Okay, I think he's qualified.
No.
Yeah.
He can be my he can be my VP.
I know Kanye is talking about running in 2020.
Oh, jeez.
No one's gonna vote.
No one wants Kanye.
I mean, we said the same thing about a certain someone.
I know, right? Who knows? At this point, it's just gonna be.
I think I have a chance of just becoming king.
Yeah.
You mean God Emperor.
No, king. And then, yeah, I just...
Yeah, we're talking about 93 board.
I wouldn't make a good president.
You wouldn't?
I'd nuke the world.
You would. At least you're honest. You know. Yeah. I'm gonna run on a platform in 2020 of no more speed limits, abolish the speed limit, and legal marijuana. That's my only two things I'm focusing on. Everything else, don't care about. I'll let my VP deal with.
I think I get complained about for sleeping in too much. It'd be like the whole, like, he doesn't take vacation, but he sleeps till noon every day.
Oh, that would be you.
If we raise the speed limit and hand out marijuana like that, we'll just have a lot more candidates for the Darwin Award.
Well, that's what I mean, natural selection. It just, we get the people out of the gene pool.
Population density, sure.
Yeah.
Solves lots of problems, yeah.
I would have a hard time being a politician. I thought about it for a while, but the thing about I didn't want to go into politics for is because half your job is fundraising. I don't want to do that. That's just not something I'm interested in doing. And I can't schmooze people, you know, like you have to as a politician. I can't, like, shake someone's hand who I hate and I think is the biggest scum and pretend that I like them. So I went to history instead.
I think it's swear too much. Someone would really say, like,
Oh.
like, you can't outrun me, president. Fuck you, dude.
Yeah. Well,
You fucking Melvin, bro.
they'd have to, like, beep all your speeches.
Or in your press conference, somebody asks you a stupid question.
I know. No.
You're stupid, get out.
I know.
That's fake news, get out of here.
Yeah, it's like, you know when teachers are like, there's no such thing as dumb questions in my class?
There are dumb
There's
questions.
dumb questions. Ethan usually asks
Yeah, I
them.
usually find a way.
The teachers are just too nice to say, that's a good question.
Are you watching Forrest Gump this semester?
Not in this class.
Yeah, but on the bright side, we might get to watch people getting blown up, so who knows.
Sweet, dude. So you're running a dumb marathon this weekend?
I'm running a half Ironman. Yeah.
But
On Saturday.
Fun and run should never be in the same sentence.
It's a 1.2 mile swim, and then I do a 56 mile bike, and then a 13.1 mile run. It'll take me about a little over 6
And
hours.
the guys with the white coats with no sleeves will be at the end for you. I'm sure.
Oh yeah, so we'll a nice cold beer. Several of them. And then sleep.
That's right. Beer act.
Yeah, so Saturday I won't be available at all. If you guys have any questions or you call me or email me, I won't respond. But I'll get back to you on Sunday. What's that?
You'll be getting sailing.
No, I did a half Ironman in Arizona last October, and I was fine. I went to a concert that night afterwards. I was tired, but that was good. Yeah, it's all about how you fuel during, like, I have to take, like, every hour I take this pill that's got salt and, like, electrolytes in it. You have to keep your salt. That's where athletes make they just drink Gatorade or they, like, just eat something, but they don't replace their sodium, and they cramp, and they get really sick.
It's electrolytes, Abby. You need electrolytes.
I know. That's why I take my salt sticks. What do you know about electrolytes, Ethan?
Well, Gatorade commercials tell me.
When was the last time you worked out?
Last time I worked out? Every day's a workout. I'm usually like writing my book.
Just getting out of bed is a workout for you?
Can you access these PowerPoints?
No, I don't have those online. No, I just have them through the video. I can make them available. I should probably make them available for the blended. I think that'd probably be a good idea. I can do that on a weekly basis at the end of each week, do an announcement, and then post them up for you guys if you want them.
I didn't miss the nugget, did I?
No, we haven't done the nugget yet. One of the things, I mean, a lot of things with my slides, I don't put a lot of text on it, so sometimes it's just photos. I mean, I can put it up for you guys if you're interested in it, but yeah, definitely. I'll put it up for you guys. Yeah, definitely. I'll do that this weekend for you. And then it'll be easier to reference than having to go back to each video and look at it. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we just have about 5 minutes left and we'll get started again.
Did I miss a lot?
We were just talking about kind of the background of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So if you want to check the video and look forward to that, you can do that. If my media works. I'm going to post an announcement after class with the link to the YouTube stream of this. So if you can't get into the video, if the video that we're recording right now on Canvas doesn't have audio, the YouTube one does. So you'll be able to.
So if it doesn't work, do we all get A's?
No. You don't. I grade you on how I like you as people. So.
I got an A last semester.
I changed it.
You like me then?
Yeah, you're good. Ethan's gonna get an F though, so.
Why do you have such disdain for Ethan? Oh
I
my God.
I suck.
Just look at him. I'm just joking.
Ethan, what game are you playing? That looks interesting.
It's called Unison League. It's really cringy. Yeah, I have no one to cheat off of this.
I know. How are you gonna make it through class? Have you started the homework yet, Ethan?
Totally, it's like done. For like weeks.
Are you lying?
Oh yeah.
He hasn't even started it yet.
I have.
I've been packing all week.
I was like at you like yesterday all day, remember?
You were working on it. I can tell.
We're moving tomorrow, so I was packing.
You got kicked out and evicted?
No.
Oh.
Apparently my girlfriend wasn't moving with me. What a stupid decision, right?
Yeah. What are you thinking, Ethan?
Oh, what an idiot. Poor Greg and Leo.
The thing I was struggling with the homework is like, does it have to be an APA format?
No.
No?
Not on the media literacy thing.
But essays do have to do it?
Yeah, so so when I say APA format, I mean your citations.
Just the citation?
Yes, I don't care if you have a cover page or an abstract or any of that kind of stuff. So I don't care how you format the body of your work. Just make sure your bibliography has APA citations.
Okay.
And then I'm good. And on this, you don't have to do citations at all. So you can just, as long as you use the checklist, write your answers next to the checklist, and then you can have your analysis under that, and that'll work. And on any writing assignment, if you guys want me to send me a draft early before the deadline, I'm always happy to review your work and let you know, like, if you're missing something or what you can do to make it better. I'm always happy to do that as long as you get it to me 24 hours before the deadline.
So Saturday?
Yeah, so if you can get me, but this Saturday, you'll have to wait till Sunday for my response because I'll be racing.
I got a lot of writing this semester.
Mm-hmm. What are your other classes?
English, and law.
Oh, man.
That's a lot of writing.
Oh, it is. Do you have Maureen for English? Have you had her before?
No.
She's really nice.
Law class, reading those depositions.
Oh, I bet. Oh,
Flawless.
that's dry. Reading law.
And then you don't understand the language because they have broken sentences. It's all
I
broken
took law
sentences.
last semester, you can skim through it.
Yeah. Did you take it last semester? Yeah. When I teach the American Revolutions class, so the Revolutionary War, I use a lot of primary documents. When you look at government documents from the late 1700s and early 1800s, it's so boring to read those documents.
Yeah, just when you're doing the writings, just look for the information that you need at the time. Don't read through the whole thing. Do not read through the whole thing. God.
Yeah, it's like a lot of times everything they could say could be done in like one paragraph, but then it's 4 pages, right? Come on.
These are like 70 pages.
Oh god. So the focus of the law is it like tech law type of idea, like patents and things like that?
Yeah, that's the idea, but it's not. It's only mostly focused there. There's a lot of other stuff.
Good.
There are some laws that don't need to be in existence.
Yeah.
Like
I'm
IRS.
part of my rugby guy.
Okay. No social life for you this semester, David.
Well, I don't have a social life anyway.
When I was in college, a professor once said, of the 3 things in college, you can pick 2. You can pick a social life, sleep, and good grades. So, but you can only pick 2.
What about video games?
Can't pick video games.
That falls under social life.
Yeah, that falls under social life. So do you want a social life and sleep? Or do you want sleep and good grades? Or do you want good grades and a social life? I'd pick sleep. Sleep is my number one.
You don't need sleep.
Oh gosh.
You can sleep when you're dead.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a terrible person if I don't get enough sleep. More terrible than normal.
That's why these things were created.
I know, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with part 2 of class. And so we're going to focus on the Iraq War for the rest of the class. So initially I wanted to also try to fit the Arab Spring in today as well, but I think we're just going to finish with the Iraq War, and then I'm going to record my lecture about the Arab Spring for Monday, and then there's going to be a video that I'm going to play in that lecture to go along with it, okay? Because that's just like a lot of information to try and cram in, and the Arab Spring deserves a pretty decent amount of attention. Okay, so the Iraq War. So
You got your voice option on?
I don't know how to, it's not working right. I have a YouTube stream going. See, but that's for a headset.
Actually, go back.
Go back? Okay, hold on, let me, it's a microphone.
See if it works.
Testing.
Try
What microphone do you have plugged in?
Try selecting communications and see what happens.
I don't have anything plugged in right now. Testing.
Just test speakers.
Test speakers. Well,
What about the next option?
see, that's for a headset,
Well,
right? Well, we're gonna go, oh, there it goes. Huh, well. See, that was there at the beginning of the lecture, and then when I put you guys on break, it was gone. So I do have a backup recording of this on YouTube, and while we were on break, I went and confirmed with Kent in our instructional design team, and he said he could hear it. So I'm going to post that link in the announcements, because one of the issues I faced this week is if students did not accept that course invitation you guys had in Canvas to accept the course and put it on your dashboard, they can't access any of the recorded Canvas things. So I'll be doing backup recordings probably for this week and next week, just to fix that. So I do have a backup recording. So I'll put that in the announcements today. So if anyone does want to access today's and you go on Canvas and you don't hear the audio, you can use the YouTube link as well.
is it actually streaming or are you just using the recording?
I'm using this.
Yeah, are you using the actual streaming or are you just recording it?
I have no idea.
No.
I have no clue, Jason.
Take a guess that you're just recording.
I guess so. Kent set it up for me right before class, so we have a backup. But yeah, so I have no clue. Okay, I'm clearly clueless about this kind of stuff. All right, so when you think of the Iraq War, first of all, Frank, were you there?
I got to the Gulf 6 weeks before that SOB invaded Kuwait.
Oh, so you were part of Desert Storm.
Yep.
Oh, okay, so let's talk about that real fast first. So, do you guys remember, anyone remember Desert Storm, or remember talking about it? Right, I remember it. And so, just overview, what do you guys remember of Desert Storm? What was the key point of Desert Storm?
Get them out of Kuwait.
Right, so Saddam Hussein in Iraq invaded Kuwait, and we allied with them, and we kicked Iraq out of Kuwait. Now, why didn't George H.W. Bush at that time try to go after and topple Saddam Hussein's government? What do you think, Frank?
Oh, what do I think, or what do I know? I want to hear both.
We want to hear both.
Yeah.
Well, you were there, so you. I was 10.
Yes,
I was 10 years old.
So
yes, you tell us what you think and what you know.
We were told, because, well, first of all, Saudi Arabia was afraid that they were next, okay, because they get a lot of their military from mercenaries, and so they're not really, it's not really their country, they're just getting paid. So they thought they were next, but because Saddam Hussein was kind of a Muslim brother, we were not allowed to specifically target Saddam Hussein.
Okay.
But they were afraid, like I said, Saudi was afraid they were next, so they wanted us to do something about it, but you don't really have to kill him, you know. So it was kind of a dual thing going on.
Okay. And also, from what I understand, looking at that war is George H.W. Bush also felt that, you know, the main goal was to get Iraq out of Kuwait, and we did that, and he felt that that was the objective, and we met the objective, and I think he didn't want to overstep his boundaries. He actually did, H.W. Bush did a really good job, I think, handling that, you know, in a quick way at least, not, you know, elongating a war. And so that was Desert Storm. And so, do you want to add anything? Because you guys, what you remember from it?
We didn't want to seem like we're invading.
Right.
Right. So we did just enough to get them out of Kuwait.
Yep.
And
and meet our objectives.
And meet our
Okay. So that was in 91, 92?
1991, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that was H.W. Bush. So now you have the Iraq War that you guys probably all remember and have been alive for and maybe have followed under George W. Bush. So when I refer to Bush now for the rest of the class, I'm talking about W. Bush, elected in 2000. Okay, so when you think about the Iraq War, regardless of if you agreed with it or not, because I think it's proved that I think the Iraq War is a perfect case study in unintended consequences when you invade a country, right? You have this idea on paper, we're going to do this, and then everything's going to be great. And then what happens is, and we're going to talk more about this when we get to ISIS, because the invasion of Iraq did create a power vacuum within that region, leading then to ISIS. And I'm not going to go into great detail on that today because we're going to save that for another class discussion. But when you think about the Iraq War in those terms, the Iraq War was not a success. At least in my opinion as a historian, it was not successful. It was successful in the sense that we toppled the Hussein government and we killed Saddam Hussein, but it wasn't successful in the sense of keeping peace in the region, right? It kind of escalated and spiraled out of control. So when you think about the Iraq War, do you guys remember what year we invaded? Yeah, the current one.
February 91?
No, the one under W. Bush. 2003. Okay. So what were the reasonings behind this invasion in 2003? Because they didn't invade Kuwait.
Weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, weapons of mass destruction. So what I'm going to put on the screen is for the online students, and I'm going to pass it out to you guys as a handout. So this is a radio address that George W. Bush gave to the nation on March 22nd, 2003. There's 4 in the deliver right now. So give it a read. It's short. It's just one page. Oh, you're good. Oh, perfect. You guys are so helpful. All right. So does everyone have a copy? Okay. I'm going to leave it on the screen for the video and for any online students. Did I give you one? I did. Okay. Perfect. So give it a read. And so this is what George W. Bush is telling the nation in 2003. And I'm just going to kind of move it for the video purpose. So.
And what struck me, well, it was kind of comical to me because in that region he wasn't the only one doing this. He was not the only one. He was not the only dictator in the Middle East.
But here's the thing to keep in mind about Saddam Hussein. He was a dictator, and he was a terrible person. Yeah. No one discounts that. But Iraq was peaceful. Mm-hmm. And he actually killed terrorists that were in Iraq. Iraq was not a hotbed of terrorism at all under Saddam Hussein. Now, another thing you have to consider is the Islamic sectarianism going on in the region at the time. So when I say Islamic sectarianism, I mean the split between the Sunnis and the Shias. Saddam Hussein is a Sunni, okay? And Iraq is a slightly Shia majority country. And so you did have a lot of people that felt that, so you have Saddam Hussein, who's a Sunni, his Ba'ath Party is Sunni dominated, but the majority of the country is Shias. And it's not a huge majority, but I think it's something like 52 or 53% are Shia. And so that also becomes a problem when we depose Saddam Hussein, because then the Shias take over and they start purging Sunnis. All right, so you have that you have to consider. But under Saddam Hussein, Al-Qaeda was not in Iraq. There was no ISIS. He pretty much killed anyone that didn't follow suit with him, either his own people or other terrorists that were trying to come into Iraq. So there's a main argument there, right? Do you is it better to have a dictator who maintains a semblance of peace? Or is it better to remove a dictator and put in a democratically elected government, even when then that descends into chaos? So, there's arguments to have on both sides of that argument, and that's something that, as time progresses, historians will be having that argument, right? And they'll be using the Iraq War as our case study for this, because, in my opinion, it's up to the people of Iraq to say we want to get rid of our dictator, right? I feel like, when over 4,000 American soldiers died in this war, it's very hard for me to look at that as a historian and say, that, we should have done that, right, when he had some peace in the region.
But that's the thing. When we captured him, he was tried in an Iraqi court.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had guards that escorted him around, but the court system, and you say we executed him. No, we did not. The Iraqi people and the Iraqi courts did that.
Okay, so that's a good designation. But what I mean is, instead of the U.S. coming in to take him out, the Iraqi people could have created their own revolution, kind of an Arab Spring type of thing. Because it's just very difficult to go into a country and overtake their dictator. I mean, look at what the countries we've done that in, right? It's never really ultimately been successful. Look at Libya, right? We're going to talk about that more about in the Arab Spring. So, but there are great arguments on both sides. Like, I'm not taking a side on this. I just think that it's hard to say what the best decision is in that situation.
Well, my side is this. We can't force countries. We can't force democracy on countries. Just because we go over there and say, okay, you have a democratic country, but no one can get together and decide how they want to do it.
Yeah, and a lot of it then still comes back to that sectarianism between the split between the Sunnis and the Shias.
Well, that's the other thing. When we were trying to get the infrastructure going back again, we were telling them, you have to hire people who are qualified. Well, for thousands of years, they've been hiring their brother, their cousin, and their nephew.
Yes.
And
it's very tribal.
Telling them they need to restructure how they've been doing things for thousands of years. And that's the part I have a problem.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually, because that's a very tribal history. Everything's very tribal and clannish. And actually, do you guys know how that split between the Sunnis and Shias came about? So in the 600s, when Muhammad died, there was a fight over should Muhammad's family members take over, or should there be a vote? Like, should there be a political choice for who should succeed Muhammad, or should it just automatically be a family member? And because of that argument, do the math here, what's now minus like 700 years? Like 1,300 years they've been fighting and literally killing each other over this designation of who succeeds as the leader of the religion. And they're still fighting over that today. And that's what makes it so difficult, this war going on in the Middle East, because we are not fighting a country. We are fighting an ideology. And how do you beat an ideology? Bombs don't take away an ideology, right? Because for every person you kill, there's someone else brainwashed and ready to go into that next. So, okay. So when you look at this, what specific things is George W. Bush telling the country? We're going. Oh, Nikki, go ahead.
I've gone past this, but just to let you know, it was 1317, 700 years ago.
Thank you. All right. I don't do math, guys. You can tell. Math is hard. Okay, so when we look at this document, what specific things jump out at you that Bush is telling the American people for the reasons we're going into Iraq? There's a few kind of buzzwords he uses.
The security of nations.
Yeah, security of nations, the future of peace, the hopes of the Iraqi people, right? Depend on our fighting forces in the Middle East, right?
There's a big lie of women.
I'm trying to find that.
Our forces will be coming home as soon as the work is done.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, that took a while, didn't it?
Yeah, it's still
yeah, they're still there. And actually, now I think they've doubled the amount of advisors that they have over there. We're going to get to that in a minute, too. Okay, so the main goals that the U.S. public are told are that we're going after these weapons of mass destruction, right? And so I want to show you guys this clip, and you can take what you want from this clip, okay? But do you guys know who General Wesley Clark is? Yes. Okay, so let me pull this up. Okay, so General Wesley Clark is a retired 4-star U.S. Army general, and he was the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO during the 1999 war in Yugoslavia. And what's that? And so take this for what you want, but this is what he has to say about the Iraq war. Okay? And this was on Democracy Now!, which is an independent, pretty liberal news outlet. So keep that in mind. Oh, you know what? I don't have the audio. And we're just going to do this on YouTube. Okay. Maybe.
It's thinking.
It's thinking. Let's see if it'll go here. I know, right? What if I refresh the page? Do you think that will help?
No.
No?
Maybe.
Let's try it.
Figure it out.
What?
Try to turn it off and on again.
No.
Make sure it's plugged in. Well,
Right.
Quick play.
To be a technical college,
I know, right?
well,
This comes up every single day. Yeah.
the network is off.
Well, if everyone would stop streaming their video games. Just joking. Okay, so essentially what he's saying, I think there's transcript here. Hold on a second. Okay, this is what he's saying. He said that.
Thank you.
He said that about 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you've got to come in and talk to me a second." And I said, "Well, you're too busy." And he said, No. He says, "We made the decision, we're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. And I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess it's the only tool you have is a hammer. Every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, "I've just got this from downstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office, today. And he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." I said, "Is it classified?" He said, "Yes, sir." And I said, "Well, don't show it to me." And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, "Do you remember that?" And he said, "Sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you." So take that for what it's worth. But there's clearly other underlying issues about why we invaded Iraq, more than just the weapons of mass destruction. Okay, so take that for what it is. Okay, so what country? What's that? See, it's gone again. So I'm not going to worry about it because we have it on the YouTube stream. I'll let the tech people figure that out. Okay. So when you think about the war in Iraq, how many countries are involved? There's a lot, right? There's about 40 coalition countries, right? The U.S. obviously leading the way. Some of the notable countries, you have the UK and Australia, who are pretty much always allied with us. You have Spain, you have Poland, other countries are sending in troops. The peak amount of troops, I think I might have a slide for this. I'm going to come back to the slide. But the peak amount of troops was in 2008, and it was about 166,000 U.S. troops in country. When we start off, we send in, I think, about 130,000, and then we peak up until about 2008, and then we start to see that decrease coming down from that, okay? You have about 28,000 British soldiers, about 2,000 Australians, and then other various countries are sending kind of smaller amounts of troops in. Now, what's public opinion at this time when it comes to how Americans feel about this? What do you guys think? Was this a popular decision?
When it first started, it was really popular.
Okay. So here's some polls that were taken around the time period. So what should the U.S. do now with Iraq? And let me see the date on here. This was January 23rd, 2003. So this is 2 months before the actual invasion, okay? So what should the U.S. do now with Iraq? 63% said find a diplomatic solution 2 months before the invasion. And then remember there was going to be an inspector's report about the weapons of mass destruction, if you guys remember that. So what to do if the inspector's report says found no weapons of mass destruction so far? 77% of Americans say keep looking. 17% say start military action. If Iraq can't prove it's shut down its program, start military action, keep looking. They're pretty split on that, okay? Americans overwhelmingly believe Hussein does have weapons of mass destruction in January of 2003. And so you can see that support for taking military action to remove Saddam Hussein was pretty high at that point. So there was some decent public support.
Under Clinton, because he was between the two Bushes there, he said we're coming to look for weapons of mass destruction. Well, let me tell you something. If you're a drug dealer and the cops call you for 8 years saying they're coming to your house to look for drugs,
Exactly.
you think you might move them?
Yeah, you might move them.
You think you might give them to your neighbor, Syria, Iran?
Right, but
and then by the time the cops show up under Bush too, they're going, we can't find any.
right.
I wonder why.
But even if they do hide them, if you can't find them, it's still not a good enough pretext to go and invade a country, even if they've hid them.
But you drive down the highway, there's an orange stripe around a light pole.
Yeah.
And what direction and how many miles off that pole did they dig a big frickin' hole and bury them all? And the guy who now knows where they are is dead. Some kid's gonna find them after a huge sandstorm.
Yeah.
But, you know, unless you know off of what direction and what stake in the ground, you're not going to find them now.
Yeah. Well, valid points. Both sides of this argument have valid points in it. But at this time, with them not being found, it's a hard sell to say we need to invade this country and find these weapons. Okay. Now, I also want to point out that France, Germany, and New Zealand did not join the coalition. They were opposed to the invasion. Those countries typically are our allies. And they argued, again, there's no evidence of the WMDs. In February of 2003, there were worldwide protests against an imminent invasion. And there was a Guinness record of the largest ever anti-war rally in Rome of 3 million people. And between January and April of 2003, 36 million people protested the war through 3,000 protests worldwide. So regardless of whatever you feel the justification or non-justification of this war, this was a very, very unpopular decision, worldwide speaking, okay? Not just looking at the U.S., okay? So what I want to do now is just kind of give you guys, this is just a map I've left up so you can, Baghdad, where Baghdad is, where Mosul, Tikrit, and Basra, and some of your main cities are. But I just kind of want to walk you guys through just a timeline of some of the key events, just so that just like a small refresher. Because at this point, the Iraq War is still not something that's taught in history classes, right? It's because it's still kind of going on, right, with ISIS and the Syrian civil war. And so usually it takes, it'll take another 10 to 20 years, I think, for this to get put into textbooks. And then it takes a while for the historians to write the historiography of a war, right? You have to kind of wait for the dust to settle before you can actually have like a clear conclusion. Nikki, what do you think? No, anything on the quizzes are on just the readings and the viewings. Yep. But just a timeline just to refresh your memory. Okay, so in September of 2002, U.S. officials report that Iraq is developing nuclear weapons of mass destruction.
I'm not feeling well.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. You're an adult. If you don't feel good, feel free to leave. March 7th, 2003, the chief UN weapons inspector said there's no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. And then March 17th through 21st, Bush gives an ultimatum to Saddam Hussein and his sons, who also, I think we killed both of his sons. Yeah. So here's, oh, I guess I didn't pull it up. But there was, an ultimatum like, if you don't, cooperate with us, we're going to invade, essentially, okay? I thought I pulled up a video, but I guess I didn't. Okay, so this is kind of hard to read, so let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger for you guys. I guess not too much. Okay, so this is a transcript from the Chief UN Weapons Inspector's report, and he said that several inspections have taken place at declared and undeclared sites in relation to mobile production facilities. Food testing mobile laboratories and mobile workshops have been seen, as well as large containers with seed processing equipment. No evidence of prescribed activities have so far been found. During inspections of declared or undeclared facilities, inspection teams have examined building structures for any possible underground facilities. In addition, ground-penetrating radar equipment was used in several specific locations. No underground facilities for chemical or biological production or storage were found so far. And I do want to point out real fast, Frank, before you comment, that they do leave this kind of open, right, so far, in the sense that we're still going to be looking. What do you think, Frank?
Well, what I think.
Or what you know, whatever you want to say.
Because the thing is, the UN the Iraqis were trying to get the UN inspectors to declare where they wanted to go ahead of time.
Oh, yeah.
And then they made the inspectors sit outside of those facilities for hours before they let them in. What do you think they were doing?
Oh, yeah.
Burning evidence, moving stuff around to hide stuff. I mean, they really, I think they made sure they had Iraqi drivers, for them, so that they drove real slow, took the wrong route, and then, like I said, made them sit outside the facilities for hours while.
So
they
let me
went
ask
in
you this. So
and destroyed
since
everything.
then, though, has stuff been found?
What's that?
Has stuff been found since then? After Saddam fell and a new government was installed, was anything found?
No.
So that's another side of that argument.
Somewhere.
What's that?
It's buried in the desert somewhere.
But how do you know? Like, we have to have evidence for an invasion. When you write a history of a war, it's very hard to say we thought they hit everything. But, and I see where you're coming from, Frank. You have to make a very, very valid point. When I was in high school and I knew my mom I was hiding stuff from my mom, of course I'm gonna hide it in my room, right? When I know she's gonna come into my room. I get your point.
Well, and my job in the Navy was intel.
Right. So yeah, you have a different viewpoint. So I welcome your opinion, but the fact of the matter is that nothing was found in 2003 to say that we know they have weapons of mass destruction, we're going to invade. I think Bush would have been better to say, we're not sure. We think so. We're going to do a preemptive, etc. I think it's the way that, and really a lot of it is more on Rumsfeld and Cheney. A president is only the sum of their advisors, right? And so if their advisors are all telling them, you got to do this, you got to do this, and this is the evidence that we have, etc., then they're going to listen to their advisors. So from what I've read a few books from investigative journalists about this, that Rumsfeld and Cheney were very much pushing Bush towards this. So I think it could have been reframed in a different way to look a little more like, hey, we're not sure, but we're pretty sure. We're not 100% sure. We're going to go in. We're going to look more for them, etc. But it didn't happen that way. Now let's keep moving on here. And so, here's the chart I was looking for. So here's just the U.S. troops in Iraq. So you see the beginning here. We peak up to, this is going to be about 150,000 there. We go up and down. And then here's our peak right here in 08. And then you see a very substantial drop. And then in October 2011. So something to consider when Obama took office. So right before Obama took office in 08, Bush had negotiated with the Iraqi government that we would remove ground troops in 2011. And so when we do that, so Obama honors that, and when we do that, that's what led to that power vacuum. And so that's the thing, is like a lot of people are like, we should just pull all of our troops out of the Middle East right now. But it's so nice on paper. Yeah, let's pull all of our troops out. But when you do that, you create power vacuums.
And there was a struggle, and now there's another mess.
And now there's another mess that is directly correlated to this. So you see a series of unfortunate events that kind of come out of this war. And I'm not placing blame on the start of it. I'm just saying that what I want you to take away from the Iraq War is what the Iraq War led to was more destabilization in the region, leading to a rise of ISIS and then the current shitstorm that we're facing over there today. So it's not about blame, it's not about who's right, who's wrong, it's just the fact of the matter is it created destabilization. Did you want to say something, David?
Yeah, we invaded without going through Congress at first.
Yeah, we've had no war declaration in Congress since 1942.
And then they went to Congress and said, they have this, they have mobile this, mobile that, just to justify us being here.
Yeah.
And I think they just made up stuff so they can justify what they did.
Well, and the fact of the matter is, as citizens, we'll probably never know, you'll never know a lot until things get declassified. And that's how history changes. Like, I like to use the Vietnam War as an example. So right when the Vietnam War ends, it's still the Cold War. We don't have access to the other viewpoints, right, because of closed archives. But the historiography of the Vietnam War started to change every decade since the war. When the Soviet Union crumbled, we restored diplomatic relations with Vietnam. We were able to access more documents. So, expect over each decade for the historiography of this war to change, right? New things will come to light. It'll debunk things that we've already thought, and it's just always something to keep in mind. Okay, so back to this timeline, again, just brief, and I'll, like you asked for, I'll post these online for you guys, and so you can access this as well, so you don't have to worry about, writing things down. So the invasion's in March. By April 9th, we controlled Baghdad, so we moved fast. We do have a great military, you can't discount that, so they did well. On May 1st, you guys remember the famous mission accomplished? He never says it, but he's got the big banner behind him. Okay. And then what you start to see is, by then things should have really started to kind of cool down, right? But now you have this sectarian crisis because now we have removed the Sunni-based government in Iraq. The Shias are going to start taking over, and so ISIS is a Sunni-led insurgency. So we start to see Sunni Shia violence now descending. So August 19th, you see a suicide bomb at the UN compound in Baghdad. Saddam Hussein is captured in December. Do you guys remember the Blackwater contractors? You hear about that? They were murdered. And I have the year in the top, so you can reference the year. In April 30th, Bush expressed his disgust about what was going on at Abu Ghraib, and about how people were treating the prisoners. Now, in June 28th of 2004, U.S. transfers formal sovereignty to Iraq leaders. Okay, so we're moved. And that's how it should have been, right? Like, hey, we've done our job. We've now it's your job to govern. Okay. And the video you guys are going to watch this week about losing Iraq, that frontline video, they're going to talk about this, the creation of the new Iraq government, Maliki, L. Paul Bremer, who was the diplomat that came over it and oversaw all that. Now, by September 7th, U.S. military deaths surpassed 1,000 in 2004. And in November 7th, you have that famous battle for Fallujah at the end of 2004.
I was there.
Were you there?
It was brutal.
Yeah.
Absolutely brutal.
There's some books out about it now. It's been long enough now that you see some writings coming out about it. Have you read any of the stuff that's come out of it?
No, because you can't believe what people that are there
Right.
says. Just what like I used to tell my wife, don't pay attention to CNN. Don't.
Well, and they're not going to tell you really what's going on because they can't.
Because they're not embedded with us.
Exactly. Well, and that's another point to bring up about the Iraq War that's different than like the Vietnam War. So, and maybe you guys who've been in the military can speak on this. So, for like during the Vietnam War and previous wars, most units had a reporter embedded, right? And then each night they would send in their reports, right, to their news outlets. Starting with really, I don't know necessarily more about Desert Storm, but I know with Iraq War, that's not the case. The journalists have been much more censored, and you do have to have some censorship, right? Like you can't just let everything out in a war. Like you have to have something classified. You can't just like, hey enemies, this is what we're doing in our location. But from what I understand, from what I've heard from veterans who've been there, is that you do not have that embedded presence as much as you've had in previous wars. Can you speak to that, Frank? Or
I spent most of my time on the ship.
So you were kind of in your own little world.
Pretty well, yeah. Okay.
Were you on a sub?
What's that?
Were you on a sub?
No, I was on the USS LaSalle.
Okay.
It was actually the Admiral's flagship out there, and until I think about when he got out there, so.
My brother was on a sub when the invasion started, and his appendix burst while they were underway, and they had to come up in the Gulf and emerge, and they had to take my brother off the sub in the middle of the Gulf.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, that was my brother. It was like right before the invasions, and my brother was kind of bummed. He was like, "Oh, I wanted to be there," but then he was kind of happy later that timing worked out for him. Okay, so you see free elections in Iraq beginning in 2005. There's the Hussein goes on trial in October 19th. U.S. military deaths reached 2,000 by the end of 2005. You guys ever heard of the Haditha massacre? That was a thing with some U.S. Marines that were accused, and I believe there's a trial that they killed some Iraqi civilians. And that's another problem that was very similar to Iraq or to Vietnam War. How do you know who your enemy is, right? How do you know? You don't. Like, are they a citizen that's helping us, or are they a terrorist? You don't know. And so you have to really sympathize with soldiers on the ground in these situations. Like, what do? And if you do accidentally kill a civilian, that's got to be a terrible feeling. But is it you or them, or so you always have to consider that human factor.
I used to tell my soldiers that I'd rather be I go to bat for them. I'd rather be carried by 8 than carried by 12.
Yeah.
What we gonna do what I have to do to come home safe.
Yeah, definitely.
And if it means shooting a woman, hey, so be it.
Yeah, and that's a hard truth about war. Is that you have to have sympathy for the people on the ground fighting it.
They all look the same.
Yeah, they do, and they do use women. Just because you're a woman doesn't mean that you can't be any less deadly, right, than a man. And kids, exactly. So that's one area I'd really like to see an in-depth study come out a little bit later is, the percentages of, women and children being used and how that impacted the war effort. You could probably see that down the road. That would be an interesting study. By the end of 2005, there's parliamentary elections as well to set up the Iraqi parliament. Okay, so April 22nd, Shiite leaders, so Shiites are the Shias, select Maliki. This is Nouriel al-Maliki as the prime minister. And so he will be prime minister, I believe, until, I want to say till 2014. In the video you're going to watch about losing Iraq, Maliki is the prominent prime minister at that time, okay? Rumsfeld resigns in November 8th, and then Hussein is hanged at the end of 2006. And do you guys remember someone leaked a cell phone video of that? Back when cell phone videos were still like really grainy, someone's like flip phone right there, but things like that come out. And then by the end of the year, U.S. military deaths reached 3,000. And then between 07 and 08, the U.S. now you have this insurgency, right? And that's something that I don't think the U.S. government expected, that you were going to have such a strong insurgency. And so now the U.S. began to arm Sunni Arab groups, and your video goes into that a little bit as well.
And that's where ISIS come from.
Yes, exactly. And then they link up with the people from Syria during the Syrian civil war. So that's why I really wanted to have you guys have a basis of this, because when we get into ISIS and the Arab Spring, this all connects and it all ties in together. So it is important that you just, we have a basic understanding of that. Blackwater guards fired on civilians. You have U.S. military deaths reaching 4,000. Now we start to return provinces like the Anbar province to the Iraqi army. And this is the pact I was telling you about. So by November 17th, so Obama had just been elected, but he's not president, and Bush negotiated that troops would be removed by 2011.
So what exactly is the Blackwater Guard?
Okay, so do you know what Blackwater was? It's like a mercenary type of army. And who's the name? The guy's name is, he's been in the news again recently. I forget his name, but it's this American guy that kind of had his own little compound. I think it was, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. They were basically government contractors to do security work.
Yes.
Yeah. So
it's a company.
Yes, it's a company. It's a private company that contracted with the government. And there was a lot of controversy because some of their guards fired on some civilians. And so it's connected. Since it's their own company, but they were contracted by the U.S. government, it became kind of a controversy. Also, there was an article out on The Intercept about this recently. I'll have to post it for you guys. Because the guy, I forget his name, it's just like on the tip of my tongue. The guy who ran Blackwater was just in the news recently for something, and I forget what it was. But I'll have to post that, and we can look more into that. Or if you want to Google it right now. Okay, so now you're at the end of 2008. And in early 2009, you have a new U.S. embassy opening in Baghdad, and Iraqis were celebrating the U.S. withdrawal from the major cities, getting their country kind of back for themselves. Iraq elections for a new parliament, and then in August of 2010, Obama announced an end to combat missions in Iraq. Okay, so that's 2010.
The Blackwater shootings and the civilians. 31 civilians were killed.
Yeah. Yeah, and so even so the U.S. government, it looks bad on the U.S. government because it was a contractor. But I mean, it is a contractor, so it's not part of the actual military.
Dustin?
What's that?
Dustin?
No.
Was it Eric Prince?
Yes, Eric Prince. Yes. Did you see anything recent in the news about him? I was listening to a podcast a few weeks ago, and they were talking a lot about him and about, I think he was like accused of murder or something like that. I'm going to look that up this weekend, and if I find any good posts, I'll put on the announcements for you guys. And then, like I said, October 21st, 2011, Obama announced that the last soldiers would leave by the end of 2011. And then December 15th, 2011, U.S. forces declared a formal end to operations in Iraq. Okay, so what's going on in 2011, though, at the same time, is the Arab Spring. And the Arab Spring is really, kind of sounds nice, right? Like, oh, it's spring, right? Do you guys know what the Arab Spring was?
It was a revolution.
Yeah, revolutions all over the Arab world. They started in Tunisia. So as this is all winding down, it's like the perfect storm. You have the Arab Spring revolutions beginning. One is going to be in Syria against Bashar al-Assad. And then you have this. So one of the problems is when we deposed Saddam Hussein's government, His party was called the Ba'ath Party. It's like B-A''ATH, Ba'ath Party. They were Sunnis, right? And they were not welcomed into the Shia government. And that's where the Iraqi government made a big mistake. The Shias took over, and instead of saying, let's have a half Sunni, half Shia government, they purged Sunnis out of the government. And so you have like something like, I don't know, you had to have tens of thousands, maybe over hundreds of thousands of Ba'ath Party members who are armed. They have their weapons. They're trained. What do? They're not welcome in this new government. They link up in Syria with the Sunni insurgents in Syria who are trying to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. And so the timing was just very, very poor for us to actually pull out of Iraq. Like, I'm all for like the U.S. pulling out when we're not necessary anymore, but we really.
We pulled too many troops out.
Well, and if you're Obama, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place because
The former president said he's going to.
exactly. So he's honoring what Bush said, which really he shouldn't have. He should have said, this is not the right time. We need to go back on this. But then if he does that, then he's open for criticism that he's ignoring what Bush did and what he negotiated. So I'm not putting any blame or on Obama or Bush on this, but it's just a really bad timing. And when we talk about the Arab Spring next week, and we start looking into that into more depth, you'll see how that directly relates to this rise of ISIS, right? Okay, let's see what else I've got on slides. Just a little chart here, Allied combatants killed in Iraq in that 12-year period. So the U.S., and there might be more than that now too, since if any advisors or any troops left have been killed since then. Almost about 4,500 U.S. military. Look at that though. Look at that high death number of contractors and journalists. This war has been the most deadly for journalists because they're being used as political pawns by ISIS. They're being, because a lot of governments will ransom their journalists, right? So ISIS, like France, will do that. ISIS took, I think, 2 French journalists a few years ago, and they paid for them. And the U.S. does not do that, right? We don't negotiate when it comes to that. So contractors and journalists have been killed at really high numbers. But look at that, right? The big toll is going to be on the Iraqi people themselves, right?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we did pay to get Bergdahl back.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's what? Did you guys have you ever heard of the series? It's called Serial, Serial, not like the food cereal. It's this woman that she's on one of the NPR shows, but she did the first season. What she does is she follows like either a trial or a news story for an entire podcast series. Like it's usually like 8 episodes. She did one on Bergdahl. I'll post a link because it's very interesting because she speaks with Bergdahl a lot, so she's trying to like show both sides of the story here. But that'll be interesting. Did he go on trial yet? Have you been following that? Is it ongoing? So, but nothing's done yet? Because he's still technically active duty, right? Yes. Like, it'll be interesting. So if you guys ever see any news about that, bring that up. Because if you guys don't know who we're talking about, Bo Bergdahl was he was in Afghanistan. Yes. He walked off of his base and he was captured by the Taliban. And he was held by the Taliban for 5 years. And then the U.S. Paid for his release. Well, the problem was, it's his story, right? Because he's saying, I walked off my base to go to another base to warn them about poor leadership on my base. Because he said that people weren't listening to him when he was complaining about his superiors. I would just keep complaining. Like, why would you walk off your base in Afghanistan, right? And so he thought he was going to, like, make it to this other base. That's his story on this podcast. So it's interesting to see what he has to say versus, like, what people in his unit have to say about him and things like that. So she presents all that. So it's really interesting to hear kind of both sides of the story. Although I don't agree with what he did because then they go searching for him and he's putting other soldiers in harm's way searching for him.
And he left all his equipment.
This is your nugget, guys.
He didn't take any of his equipment. He just walked off.
This is your participation nugget for the day. So this is your current prime minister of Iraq at the moment. So Maliki, so I wanted to be clear on that because the video you're going to watch this week talks about Maliki as prime minister. So I want to make sure that you know that as of now, because that video is a few years old, he's not prime minister anymore, and this is your current prime minister. Okay. So take a photo or jot it down in your notes. Haider al-Abadi. And if I ever mispronounce the Arabic names, please correct me. I do my best. It's difficult sometimes. And sometimes when you're reading, do you ever like see a name you can't pronounce, and in your head you just go like boo as you're reading it? But you see it, so you know what you're talking about.
It's a blank noise.
Yeah, blank noise in your head because you're reading, so you see it, you know, but it's hard to pronounce. Sometimes I have to do that with Arabic names. I've gotten better over the years, though, at pronouncing them. Okay, so are there any questions about what we've talked about today in regards to Israel and Palestine and in regards to the Iraq War? We're good? Okay, so again, I knew I wasn't going to be able to fit in Arab Spring today. It's just too much. So again, since I'll be out of town on Monday, you do not have to... What's that? I got 5 minutes. All right, good timing today. You do not have to come into class on Monday because I will not be here. My lecture will be put online, so I'll record it this afternoon, and I'll put it online today, barring any technical difficulties I have. And you can watch that on your own time, but please watch it before class next Wednesday, because I do want to be able to, I'll kind of reiterate a few points about the Arab Spring in it, so that we can have a class discussion about it, but I don't want to spend too much time on it on Wednesday, because we'll have to move on to other things. I'm already a little bit behind. That's the story of my life as a teacher.
With you being gone on Monday, are you at all like accessible?
Yes, so I will be driving home from California. I'll be in the car. Okay. I'm not driving. I'm going to be in the back seat of my friend's car. So if you need to call me or email me, I will be available. Okay. So you can do that, and I will be able to call you back or respond to an email on my phone. Okay, so you guys should be good to go. So other than that, let me just make sure I didn't have any other... yeah, we don't really have time for that, so we're going to talk about that later. Okay, you guys have a great day. Thanks for coming into class today. I'll see you all next Wednesday, and I will post this video link to YouTube as well in case we had issues with audio, and I'll post my slides for you as well in the announcements today. Okay, you guys have a good one. Have a great weekend. Good first week, guys. Good first week. I'm enjoying all the questions. You guys are doing great. All right.